Hello, I'm Anthony Meany, Senior Vice President of Security and Operations at Pearl Technology. And today we're going to talk about how threat actors are using artificial intelligence and automation to enhance their ability to push out large volume customized phishing emails, which is why we're calling it spraying spears. So we'll give you some examples and some things to look out for. Since the beginning of phishing emails, we used to laugh at some of the bad grammar or misspelled words or just blatant flags that were in your face. However, in the last couple of years, we've seen a significant advancement in the sophistication of these phishing emails. And some of the human errors that were there before are no longer there. And it's gotten so good lately that some cybersecurity experts are actually falling for these emails. So it's very concerning. There's many contributing forces to what's going on with the current state, but here's just a couple of the significant drivers, right? Last year, Verizon recorded that 43% of breaches involved phishing and or pretexting. So we know that phishing emails are going to be used as that approach to get kind of that initial access and try to trick that human firewall into letting them in. We saw that business email compromise scams recorded the highest total loss by victims at roughly 1.8 billion in 2020. That's just what was recorded. So with the amount of money in this industry, unfortunately, these cyber attacks are not going to go away anytime soon. With COVID, a lot of companies shifted to teleworking. Unfortunately, they were just not postured with the cybersecurity tools in place to manage that. And we saw a lot of people going home, and instead of using their VPN, they were just going directly to their cloud services, whether that's Office 365 or specific websites. So when they weren't using their VPN, they were not having the security boundary and layers of security that you would typically find when people are working in the office with the spam filters, the gateways, and everything like that. So unfortunately, a lot of people were working from home and just fully exposed and very vulnerable. We saw an enhancement in assistant services, so Google Translation, all the tools that allow one country to easily translate into another language. We saw a lot of tools like Grammarly to kind of help out with some of the punctuation and the emails coming through. And then tools like Canva so that people could generate very professional looking graphics and make their emails look very legit, pennies on the dollar. In the digital marketing realm, there's a lot of tools that have allowed people to use automation for targeting and delivery. We see that with Facebook ads and Google ads, right? So they can put a very custom approach to their emails and hit a very targeted group of people. And then obviously, as you know, there's phishing kits and phishing as a service. So people with very low skill sets can just outsource and use custom threat actors for these services. And now we'll give you a couple examples of how some of these automated approaches played out. Last year, they detected a sophisticated Microsoft phishing attack where essentially the threat actor would send an email. If the person clicked on the link, they would then determine whether or not it was an intended target. If it was, they would go to that person's company website and their Office 365 login, pull down the logo and the backsplash. Then they would generate their own login page, put that logo and backsplash on there and try to get you to enter your username and password and essentially steal your credentials from there. So what we noticed is that a couple years ago when we all had our own Exchange in our own on-prem environment, people were familiar with what their Outlook web access URL was. Typically it was your domain.com/OWA. But now with Office 365, depending on how you're approaching your login on a website, you might be rendered a couple different URLs. It depends on how your OAuth is configured, but even to technology pros, a lot of us can be confused on what it should be. And I challenge you to ask your IT team, what is that URL supposed to be? So if we're not familiar with what it is, then the average user, they're pretty much just stuck. So if they come across something that looks very comfortable and familiar, they're obviously going to throw their credentials into that. Now I'll give you an example of some of the digital marketing and automated tactics that threat actors are using, which is search engine optimization poisoning, which has been around for quite a while. But what we saw last year is that threat actors were targeting business operations. And what they were doing is creating legitimate looking websites with free resources and using a lot of keywords for whether it was a template for an invoice or template for resume questions, etc. And then they were using search engine optimization, which is basically loading those websites with a lot of the keywords that would help this page get found on a Google search. And they actually found 100,000 malicious Google sites that looked very legitimate. And I'll kind of walk you through how this would play out. So, say you had an interview coming up today, didn't have your questions handy, so you went and did a quick search for interview question examples. One of the first pages that pops up is how to ask the best interview questions, and the URL is interviewresources.com. Doesn't get any better than that. So you click on it. It's a very professional website, even has a PDF template that's very handy. You can download it and use it for your interview. And now you've downloaded malware onto your computer. So this is a very challenging issue because it's hard to inform your staff on what is a reputable site for some of these, one-off type resources. Not everyone's going to know what the best legitimate website is for something like this. So it's going to take some containerization, definitely some zero trust to tackle this issue. It's important when we're talking about spear phishing that we're not just talking about email, and we pay attention to some of our social media inboxes as well that are getting flooded with spear phishing attacks. A lot of these actually are being done by bots. So advanced natural language processing has given birth to some of this automation, and these bots are actually outperforming humans, successfully phishing 2 out of every 3 users. We saw at a Black Hat conference, the SnapR machine is learning spear phishing Twitter bot and is a data-driven menace, just unleashing large volumes of tweets. And it's essentially learning what is trending and influencing individual accounts and being able to essentially social engineer people in a very customized, targeted fashion. One of the most interesting trends with threat actors utilizing artificial intelligence is the deepfake frauds. In the last couple of years, we had some reports come out of an energy firm and a tech firm and United Arab Emirates Bank, where essentially a threat actor was using technologies to regenerate a senior leader's voice and or video, and then call someone within that company and ask them to transfer a wire fund. If you hear some of these examples, the quality is pretty bad. There's a lot of red flags. However, the sophistication of these technologies is growing rapidly, and this is something we need to pay attention to. Just this year, the FBI came out warning that threat actors were going to try to insert themselves into virtual meeting platforms and try to engage in asking for these wire transfers using, again, the voice of someone's boss or something like that. And then we just saw that there was a video just newly released where the deepfake video was a Ukrainian president asking his troops to lay down their weapons and surrender. Again, if you watch these videos, they're pretty generic. They look pretty bad, but this is something that as it sophisticates and grows, it's going to be something very concerning. Now we've talked about the trends in artificial intelligence and automation that threat actors are using. It's important to talk about ways that you can protect yourself from some of these techniques. First and foremost is obviously user awareness. It's important to teach people to be very skeptical of the emails that are coming through, do the research, use a fact-checking website like Snopes.com. And if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So we also need people to be familiar with URL shortening. It's kind of a technical thing to ask someone to be able to take a URL and go see where it's really directing them to, but it is so common that we need people familiar and comfortable with that. We need people to know that a lot of these emails are going to try to create a sense of urgency. They want you to act before you think, and it's very important that you're aware of what these keywords are that are trying to get you to act. We ask that people are extra careful when you're using your mobile phone. Typically, when you're traveling, you're kind of distracted trying to keep up with your emails, and you don't have the full feature of a lot of your apps. For example, just checking an email that has a link in it. Typically, people would hover their mouse over that link and get to see where that URL is really going. However, when you're on your phone, depending on what kind of phone you have, some phones let you to press down on that URL and it'll pop up and tell you where it's going. But some phones, if you do that same press down on the URL, it'll take you directly to that website. So we ask people just to wait on those, get in front of their computer where they have that full feature, and take a good look at it. After, we talked about all these different tactics and techniques, it's important that you're sending phishing tests at least monthly to show people some of these trends that are happening and test them out when you don't have as much on the line. We're asking that people look at what services they're paying for their email gateways and their spam filters. Typically, there's advanced features and services that you can pay for. So if you're getting a lot of spam email and phishing emails, look into your services and see if you can upgrade them. Again, we always talk about multi-factor authentication. It's critical because if some of these tactics happen, you can still protect yourself, even though your username and your password were taken. That two-factor might be the one thing that saved your account from being totally compromised. And now that we've moved into kind of more of a hybrid teleworking model and we have people more mobile, we cannot emphasize enough using a higher advanced endpoint protection like an EDR or something like that. This concludes our update on how threat actors are using artificial intelligence and automation to enhance their spear phishing and social engineering attempts. So if you have any updates for us, we're definitely looking forward for more research and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.